Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome students to this course on low cost building materials and techniques. My name is Dr. Vishal Chettry and I am working as an assistant professor in the Department of Architecture, Planning and Design at IIT BHU Varanasi. Since you have enrolled for this particular course on low cost building materials and techniques, which is floated by NPTEL, so it would be a very good experience, and you will understand different low cost materials and the techniques that are possible for constructing any building in much affordable cost. So all that will be covered in this entire lecture series, and particularly today we will focus on building cost components and influencing factors. The content of this particular presentation will be focusing on the components of building cost breakup, material cost and availability factors, labor cost and skill availability, because that is also one of the factors which decides the components of building cost, design decisions and cost implications, impacts of time on the construction cost, because the more you delay the project, the cost of the construction also keeps on increasing because of the ongoing utilization of labor or maybe other supporting services which are being utilized for the construction. So that we will understand in depth. Then financial factors that affect the cost, regulatory impacts, and then we will conclude this presentation with the summary and some wrap up activities at the end. Also I will try to give you a glimpse of the topics that will be covered in the next presentation. Thereafter some resources which will be shared with you, which you can refer and understand more on the particular topic. So to give you a recap of what was covered in the previous presentation, we emphasized on the low cost construction, try to understand the background, that why low cost construction is needed and why it is to be achieved and how it can be achieved without compromising safety, quality or building performance. Also we understood how rising demand and affordability gaps push the need for innovative construction solutions. Then we also understood the concept of embodied energy and learnt that the hidden energy in material is a key factor in deciding the environmental impact of that particular material. So possibly from that lecture you will be understanding on, or you will have a greater understanding of the material and the material to promote in a particular construction style. Then the environmental impact of building was discussed, wherein different methods of construction or different practices was discussed. Then green and low cost solutions was discussed, and also different rating systems that are available to decide on the sustainability of the project or of any construction is determined. So that was also briefly discussed in the previous presentation. So with that lecture, it was basically background to the particular topic that is introduced in this entire lecture. So that was introduced, and hopefully once you have completed that, you will be able to understand more about what will be covered in the this presentation. So before this we had understood the need for low cost construction, and for that it was emphasized that building cost the cost of construction is actually a major deciding factor in determining the affordability of that particular building. So let us now try to understand what are the components of that particular building which decides on the affordability. So the first and foremost of that cost includes, and also which has a higher share in the entire cost of construction, is the material cost, that is the raw materials that are used for construction. So bricks, cement, steel, aggregates and finishes. So these are some of the materials which are used extensively in the construction. So that actually consumes 50 to 60% of the entire cost, and if we try to find and use some alternate materials, then these materials like replacing cement, steel based on the locally available material that is present, so possibly the material cost can be reduced by at least 20 to 30%. The next is labor cost. It remains unchanged, but yeah, that doesn't change much, but it is one of the components of the affordability of a building. So skilled, semi-skilled and unskilled workers together, the entire remuneration or the salary that is being given to these skilled to these labor is actually 20 to 30% of the entire cost of the building. Then equipment and machinery cost, because if you have ever seen the construction, the place of construction, you must have come across some specialized machines like mixers, lifts, scaffolding and tools, and sometimes cranes that are being installed in a particular place for easy construction. Then overhead expenses, sometimes some unforeseen circumstances happen, or you have to construct a small site office, utilities or supervision of the architect or some engineers. So these also have some extra cost, as in when these experts are invited to visit the site for where the construction is happening, so that also incurs extra cost. Along with that, the professional fees, that is the architectural, engineering and the consultancy, typically ranging from 3 to 7% of the total construction cost. It varies with the scale of the project. So that is also a part of the entire cost component of the project. So here you see that the major portion, as was mentioned earlier, is the material cost. So that is the challenge on how to minimize this cost, and that is where this particular course will help you understand and give you an understanding on how to minimize this material cost by using some low cost solutions and some modern affordable housing techniques. Then the building cost breakup. So the cost breakup is the distribution of the total project. So typically the cost distribution in a residential building, if I try to give you the cost breakup, it is somewhere the materials that consume 50 to 60%, labor it costs around 20 to 30%, equipment and formwork 5 to 10, and contingencies for 5 to 10%. So the cost breakup varies with building type, like if you are constructing a small scale building, possibly the material will be consumed less, and if the design is simple, it doesn't have any fancy form of the building, so possibly in that case the cost may be minimized. The materials that is being used, if you have used all the locally available materials, so in that context the cost also can be minimized. If not, then you have to bring materials from far off places, and that will increase the cost of construction. Then also the location is important factor. For example, if you are constructing a building in any plain areas with that of any high altitude areas, so there is an added extra cost that one has to pay while constructing a building in high altitude or extreme regions, like somewhere in extreme areas like Leh and Ladakh, or in Thar desert areas, or somewhere in in a very dense and forest areas. So all these projects which are built in isolated locations have an extra added cost due to this, because there is no such locally available shop from where you can purchase. You have to transport most of the goods from far off places, so that increases the cost, plus the availability of labor in nearby area will not be there. So you have to bring labor from far off places and give them a place of shelter from where the construction can happen. Then the construction technology, if you are using modern and advanced technology but it is cost intensive, then the cost will increase. But at the same time, there are many modern and advanced technologies which helps in minimizing the cost of construction. So accordingly, careful planning has to be done before before the entire budget is actually prepared for the construction. So with this analysis, it will help you deciding the major cost driver of the project. Then also talking about the material cost and the availability factors in the previous slide, let us now understand it in more depth. So the material cost is actually influenced by market price fluctuations. For example, just now as I am recording, so there is a war that is happening in in Gulf nations. So with that, the cost because there is difficulty in getting petroleum products and related materials in India. So possibly with this, the cost of steel and other associated materials like glass and all that has significantly increased because of unavailability of the specific raw material. So in that case, the market price fluctuates. So but if that tension in that region is actually minimized, so possibly after a period of time, the market price will gain. There will be no fluctuations in that, and it will be as it was earlier. So that is where such conflicts and such sudden global issues creates the impact on the market, and due to which the price fluctuates. The next is availability of raw materials, and sometimes it happens due to trade agreements between the countries. It happens that certain taxes on certain materials is actually increased, and because of that, the availability of raw material within a country is shortened. The supply becomes a problem in that region. So that is where the availability of raw material is also is also a deciding factor. The next is transportation distance. The more you travel to transport the raw materials for construction from one place to another, the higher is the cost of construction. So cement prices currently in India varies between 320 to 450 per bag, while the steel prices fluctuates between 56 to 78 per kg depending on the current market conditions. So these are the current prices, but it is very fluctuating. So there is no specific price that today what is there, it will remain the same for at least a year. That is not happening in building sector. So locally available materials reduces transportation cost at least by 10 to 20%. Then handling losses also, because when you bring materials from one place to another, if it is brick or cement or sand, so sometimes some of the cement bags may be damaged, or some of the bricks may break during the transportation process, or during the transportation of steel bars. Some of it may corrode since it is exposed to the atmosphere, and all the different issues may lead to handling losses. So that is why if you use locally available material, the cost is significantly reduced. Plus seasonal availability impacts the price, like sands, bricks. So because there is a mining of sand that happens, only then it is available in the market. So in case of flood or in case of monsoon season, it is not possible for mining of sand. So possibly the availability of sand during those seasons is limited, and that will increase the cost of construction. That is what you have to understand. Then next is labor cost and skill availability of skilled labor. So if there is shortage of trained masons, then the labor wages increases. Then regional wage rates, so it varies from region to region. In region where the laborers are less available, so possibly there the wage rates are higher. So that is why in metro cities like Delhi, Mumbai, Bengaluru or in Kolkata, the wage rate is very high for the skilled labor compared to what we see in small towns and villages. So that is the reason, because there is a lot of construction that is happening, plus the cost associated with the day-to-day spending is also very high in that region. So also the local are not the experts or the laborers are not available locally. So you have to bring labor from other places, and that creates the like imbalance in the wage rates. Then next is productivity level. Skilled labor improves productivity. If you just use whatever labor that is available, having known that they do not have expertise, so then lot of mistakes may happen, and you may have to like break the construction or demolish a part of wall that is wrongly like constructed, or a column that is wrongly constructed. So all that may happen. Labor laws and welfare provision is also a major factor that decides the labor cost. Seasonal migration of worker, you know that during prime agricultural season, laborers go back to the villages for agriculture. So that is where there is a shortage, and during that time the wage rates or the cost of hiring a labor increases. Then training and skill development. Investment in training enhances work quality and reduces long term rework costs. So if you can give a formal training to laborers before a project, so possibly that will minimize some rework costs during the project. Then there are some design decisions and cost implications which has a major factor to play while minimizing the cost of construction. The first is building form and geometry. So if your building is very simple and can be easily designed, so then in that context the cost of construction is lower to that of very extravagant and designed with lot of architectural features. So that will increase the cost of the project. So it depends on if you have good capital with you and you have to fulfill all your wishes, so you can go ahead with the conventional way of construction. So that is where the low cost will not be a priority in that scenario, but where a low cost is a priority and it is one of the factor to be considered, then possibly in that scenario you may not be able to design something which is very extravagant, and sometimes the features and architectural features that are present may not be necessary also. Then next is structural system selection, that if what is the choice of whether you are using RCC, steel, composite or load bearing systems. This affects the cost and also the construction time. So depending on that the cost is decided. The next is space planning efficiency. So if you could design or your space in for example as shown here within a dedicated small space, you are able to have all the requirement of the client fulfilled. So possibly that will minimize the construction cost, or because you are utilizing less built up area because there is less wastage of spaces in terms of corridor and other circulation spaces inside the building. Then the other factors that decides the construction cost are the choice of materials and finishes. In this premium finishes, if you are using very high cost interior finishes, so that will increase the cost of the project. If you are using sustainable design strategies like passive design, so in long term that will help you minimize the cost of the building. Standardization and modular design, as I had explained earlier, if you go for modular planning, so possibly there, or if you use prefab material, that is prefabricated material, so in that scenario or in that context the material the cost of construction can be minimized. Then since the design decisions and all that is understood, now we also have to understand what is the impact of time on construction cost. So we have often seen that in many of the discussions in general public, that a project which was supposed to be completed in 3 years gets extended for 5, 10, 15 years to complete, and within that duration we also get to know that the cost of the project has doubled or sometimes tripled. For example, if a hospital was supposed to be designed within 5 years and it may have a budget of around 50 crores, but if it is extended due to many issues, then in that case the cost of the project also increases, because the continuous use of machineries, continuous use of labor and associated expertise, all that is going behind addition of the cost of the construction. So that is one of the factors. So if you are delaying the project, so you are adding the cost of the construction by at least 10 to 15%. So that is where proper planning of construction has to be done. Then inflation and price escalation has to be understood. With this, at least 5 to 8% annually the cost of the material increases. So that is why generally it is targeted for at least a small level of construction 1 year, or should be within 1 year the construction should be completed. Beyond that, the cost of materials increases after a year, and then there is a chance that at least 5 to 8% annual difference you may have to suffer. Then interest on capital, because longer construction period increases interest, and then that also increases the cost of construction by at least 8 to 12% per annum. Then seasonal construction challenges, you very well know that during monsoon and extreme weather season you cannot construct buildings in that season. So if you have taken precautions and during such favorable seasons you have constructed at least the frame of the structure, later on the partition wall and the interiors can be completed in any of this season without compromising on the pace of construction. Then acceleration cost, fast tracking projects increases labor shifts, equipment uses. This is also a factor to decide, that if you are exceeding a certain pace, then possibly the cost of construction also increases. So this all has to be calculated properly, and that is where professionals such as project engineers or construction managers are to be hired for projects. So they help you decide, and such construction management professionals help you decide on the process of completing a project within the particular timeline and within a particular budget. Then the other factor to be considered is the financial factors, like interest rates. It increases month by month availability of credit. So that is also a question. If you are using loans, possibly you have to keep on paying the EMI of that construction if it is not finished in time. Cash flow management, efficient fund flow prevents work stoppages and avoids penalty costs. That has to be ensured that you are able to pay dues of the material and of the labor wages in time, or else they will stop working with dedicated interest and enthusiasm. So possibly then you may have to incur you have to delay the project. Inflation rate, rising inflation increases material cost, labor cost and service cost. Taxation and duties, all these GST, local taxes, that has to be considered and has to be well thought in advance. Plus risk and return expectations have to be understood in case of financial factors of the cost. Then the other factor that determines the cost of construction is regulatory impact, like building bylaws and development controls, like FAR, setbacks, height restrictions, all that has to be followed. If you do not follow these regulations, then possibly tomorrow if there is an inspection from the concerned building works committee, then you may have to pay fine for all the mistakes that you have done. Environmental regulations, if these are not taken in advance, then due to litigation and all those court cases, your project may be delayed. Safety regulations, fire safety, structural safety, all that has to be ensured, or else then it will delay the process, or at times it increases the construction expenditure also, but it is a good thing to do. Approval procedures and delays, lengthy approval process escalates cost. So that is why government is trying for a single window clearance for such projects, which minimizes delays in procedures. Land use and zoning regulations, all this have to be understood, and you have the project where this is going to be constructed, you have to have proper permission for constructing a building over there, or else it will go into litigation and then lot of money is wasted in that. Compliance and penalties have to be understood for the particular project. So to conclude the overall cost components and influencing factors, so building cost is a multidimensional concept. It is not only thought that okay, the material cost is the majority, so I will always think of how I can reduce material cost. So in that thought process, you may compromise on the quality of material, so that should not happen. So that is why it is a multidimensional concept, and you have to think very well about all the materials and associated cost factors. Then efficient cost management requires holistic planning, integration with technical, economic and managerial considerations. Material and labor availability significantly affects project feasibility, timelines and overall expenditure. Design decisions play a critical role in cost optimizations, where simplicity, standardization, as I was mentioning, modular planning, all this helps you minimize the cost. Time management is essential, or else we have seen that how if we do not follow time restrictions for a project, it increases the cost of the project, because many things are associated with it: inflation, the interest rate, the capital that is borrowed. So all that will have further further burden on the project cost. Regulatory compliance and financial planning must be strategically aligned to avoid delays, penalties and budget overruns for the project. So to perform some activities and think on some questions after the lecture, these are some activities that are suggested. You can complete this once the lecture is over. So in our next presentation, we will focus on need and policy framework of low cost construction, and the topics are listed here which will be focused in that presentation. So these are some resources which can be referred for this presentation to understand more in depth about cost components and the influencing factors. So with this, I would like to conclude my presentation, and I hope you were able to understand details about cost components and the influencing factors for the for any building construction. So thank you once again.